Thank you for joining us for our success stories of workflow automation and action session today. We're going to be going through ways to eliminate manual tasks and errors. Before we get underway, just want to introduce myself. My name is Matt Ehde. I'm a business development specialist here with Naviant. And for our agenda today, we're going to highlight places and where you can use OnBase Workflow, give you a couple ideas on ways to update your current workflows, introduce a couple use cases of workflow to you guys, and then wrap up with how to manage your more complex processes, again, using workflow. So before we kind of jump into those new things and those use cases, just wanted to take a moment to highlight where workflow can be used. Workflow is this great automation engine and electronic routing system that enables you to work faster and more efficiently, and it can be used throughout every step of your business process. On the screen here, I have this process framework, and the idea here is that nearly every business process fits into this simplified 5-step framework. Processes are initiated with some sort of request, whether that's a form, email, or application. Then it's routed along with any necessary supporting documents to the appropriate person for processing. Then upon evaluation, that user is going to determine whether they have everything required to move it along and take the necessary actions. Step 4, you may need to confer with a coworker for additional review, and they'll either approve or deny the request. It's at this point, if it is denied, it might head back to step 1 for reinitiation, or they can confidently close the case. And then with some organizations, some sort of retention policy is applied to these documents. Overall, workflow exists at every step. You automatically can ingest these requests into your system, automatically route them to the appropriate person or persons to approve or deny the requests, and then at the end, apply that retention policy. All of this can be configured to happen automatically, just to make you and your organization better. That's our quick overview of where workflow can be used. Now we're going to jump into some use cases and ways in which to improve upon your current use of workflow. We're going to start here with workflow notifications. If your organization is using workflow, you probably have notifications configured to let you know when documents have been received, you have an item to review and approve, or if some task has been completed. Workflow notifications ensure that you're in the know about what's happening around your business processes and what needs to be accomplished. All of this functionality is nice and, kind of like this slide, simple. You understand what a workflow notification is, but there's more that you can be doing. So how can we make our workflow notifications a little bit more robust and impactful? In the realm of best practices, the first thing to call out and to consider is volume and the frequency of sending notifications. The purpose of notifications kind of breaks down as you get any sort of volume in a queue. No one wants to get hundreds of emails a day, just letting them know another document has arrived, because ultimately that defeats the purpose. And those notifications are just going to be stored away in a folder in someone's mailbox. So we want to consider, again, the frequency of which we're sending things. It's probably more practical to send a single email at the end or the beginning of the day with a list of documents that have arrived in a particular queue. The next point here is probably a little bit more stylistic, and it's based on probably design preference, but it's worth considering when creating new notifications or just looking back at what we already have in the system today. And that's the use of plain text versus formatted notifications. I've heard plenty of horror stories about workflow notifications being marked as spam. And from the sounds of it, a lot of it has to do with the way that they look and the content of the notifications. Again, in reference to my last slide, super plain, white background, black text, and if someone were to receive that, they might think twice about it because we've all been conditioned and trained to be on the lookout for malicious emails. The next thing that a notification like that might have is just super basic text. It might read something like, there's a document waiting for you to review. Here's a link. Again, that might raise people's guard just a little bit. So the point really is that we want to be mindful in the design and the content of our notifications, because creating quality notifications can provide a lot of context around the documents and processes that we're notifying people about. And one way that you can kind of enhance that is through the use of token placeholders. It is worth mentioning that token placeholders can be used in plain text formatted notifications, just so you know. Our example here we have for Cindy Smith in her pending invoice that she's going to be approving is a formatted notification. You can see that they have a picture there for their company logo, 9 Second Foods. They added that in there. Again, just to kind of let them know who this is coming from. A couple of the things to call out in this notification, we're able to provide Cindy the dollar amount for the invoice. That's a keyword coming from the system. Obviously, who she's receiving this from, Starbucks Coffee Company. Again, another keyword that we're able to put in here with a token. They also have the document actually attached to it, which is a really nice feature. And then we have that URL there for the workflow queue itself, which you can click on and jump into. We have a couple more examples to take a look at here. Just again, provide a couple different flavors of what you can do with notifications. Again, these are both formatted. Looking at company logos, this one here on the left, where it says, we have resolved your request with the following resolution, and then it states, sent her the updated lower fee schedule. So this is a cool use case because it comes from a case management solution, and that sent her the updated lower fee schedule actually comes from a text box within the solution. So that's just a form field that is brought over as a token. And then you can see below that it says click for documents. And it's just a way to kind of clean up and consolidate that URL that we had on the last screen. Again, just a nice feature, kind of nice to have there. And then lastly, we'll look at this one on the right. This one's just using some color to call out certain dates. Towards the bottom of the notification, you can see it says business requirements due by August 2021. That's highlighted in red. Again, just a neat way to be able to call out specific information for your users when we're sending them notifications. And the last point I'll make on this is that when our notifications are more robust, they don't just start processes, they can really kickstart them. So moving along, we'll get into one of our first use cases here. And in this use case, we're highlighting how you can easily make information available to update other business applications. Here we're looking at an employee expense reimbursement form. This is all completed in OnBase. So a user is going to go ahead and fill out a Unity form, add their receipts, add the dollar amounts, all that good stuff, and submit it for approval. It then goes through its approval steps, and kind of that's that. The information, it's done in OnBase, and the information resides in OnBase. However, for the employee to actually be reimbursed, we've got to move that information over to our HRIS system. And how do we do that? Using Workflow, we can create an action to export the metadata and properties out to some sort of directory. Once we do that, the information is much more easily ingestible for the HRIS system. And then, of course, we're going to see that reimbursement on our next paycheck. Pretty good deal with that. And this kind of doing this process is good alternative to configuring some sort of API or web call. Much simpler, and especially when we're only dealing with basic information. Our next use case we're going to highlight is how you can use workflow and couple it with redacting sensitive information. So it's actually a pretty simple way to be able to redact sensitive information on documents, and particularly we have to look for documents that have this information in static locations. Perfect example, we have a check here. And workflow allows you to configure the exact position that a note should be placed on a document. You're using the horizontal X and vertical Y coordinates of the information. By configuring a note type, you can adjust the look of the note, say with a familiar black box. And with our example here, you can see we've redacted the routing and account number from this check using a note type and workflow. Pretty simple. A couple other examples here. We have an employee healthcare enrollment form. On here, we blacked out the social security number for the spouse and any dependents. And then on an I-9 form, social security number is required for you to do that. And again, we've placed our note in that exact location. Worth noting, depending on user group settings, you can grant or deny the ability to view this information by toggling the notes on and off. This next item here is the idea around calendar concepts and using those to help with your workflows. And this is related to load balancing. Load balancing is a great feature that workflow has, and you can do that in several different ways. One of them, organizing work or distributing work rather by kind of just the percentage of work that you received in a day. You can do it by priority, user groups, that list goes on. But load balancing can also be incorporated along with configuring an org chart and calendar functionality, which is what we're going to highlight here. Business calendars can be configured for the business days your organization operates. They're typically referenced by timers or any sort of rules that are checked based on dates. So obviously you can go in and configure business days, holidays. Then you can get more granular than that, go down to something like a shift calendar. So let's say you have a user that works in the mornings, and then another user comes in and fills in for them in the afternoon. So again, you're able to split up that work and dictate that within workflow. And then going one step further, we're looking at something called coverage queues. For that example, let's say user A is configured to cover for user B in case of absence. So then user A will see any documents of user B's when they're unavailable. And looking at our calendar setup we have here, we have Q1 calendar, January, February, March. We've highlighted our business days in the lighter orange, holidays in that darker orange, and then vacation days in blue. So that's, let's say in our example there, user B is out on holiday. So we need user A to step in. And workflow allows you to create individual user calendars and configuration. So again, with our example, we'd have to set up an individual calendar for user A and user B. Obviously, not everyone has access to config, so the idea of having your sysadmin manage user calendars just isn't practical. Whether that's based on the number of employees that you have at your organization or simply the fact that they're your sysadmin. This is probably an activity that's best suited for a department manager because they're probably already keeping track of this information. They might be doing it in a spreadsheet. So for a manager to be keeping track and then just passing it along to your sysadmin is just duplicative work. So a way we can get around this, we don't necessarily have to update individual user calendars and config. We can streamline that by taking our vacation and absence information from that spreadsheet and putting it into Workview. I know Workview is often looked at as a super complex and intimidating low-code application builder, and it has, it's well suited to do that, but it's also really just a manager of relational data, and in this case, a user and their vacation or absence dates. So for our coverage queue, we can have workflow directed to look at our Workview application for this information. And this really allows our manager, our business user, to be able to update this information on the fly without having to bother our sysadmin with making these updates to our individual user calendars. So again, that's just an easy way to incorporate workflow and Workview together and kind of be able to get some different type of information into your OnBase system that is also useful. Moving on to our next use case that we're going to highlight here. We're talking about external collaboration, different processes around that. In this example, we're going to highlight how OnBase Workflow and Highland's file sharing platform, ShareBase, work together. So we might be looking at a process like contract management where you have to collaborate back and forth with external parties. Now, let's say we've completed our first pass at creating a new agreement in OnBase, and we're ready for this external party to review the changes that we've made. Using workflow business rules, OnBase is automatically going to add documents to ShareBase, and then it's going to notify the recipients via secure link in an email. With this, you'll have options to add password protection or even expiration dates, so someone's not viewing it way down the road. And then once they've done their review of our work and they want to send it back, they can re-upload and their documents are automatically imported and indexed back into OnBase. So looking at our diagram here, you can see we have our upload folder in the bottom middle section of the screen, and then we have our monitoring service there. So as a new document comes in, we're monitoring for those documents, and once we see that they're there, we pass them back into OnBase. Again, you can do some great configuration around this where you might want to make this a revision, just so for comparison's sake. So it's really nice to be able to have this secure back and forth because ShareBase is an encrypted platform, and it really replaces the need to create or maintain an SFTP portal or collaborating strictly via email. And when you're talking about something like a contract and you're just doing copy and pasting back and forth, that can get messy. So we really want to allow OnBase to do its thing with a lot of the nice features that we have in there for comparing red lines and not doing that copying and pasting. So in addition to sending documents out to third parties, we can also request them as well. So as part of the workflow, you can choose an action that sends out a secure one of these ShareBase folders out to a third party. So you'll click that action and we're going to create it, and we will have those users or those third parties that we're working with be able to add needed content in. You might think of a scenario working with financial documents for banking. Maybe you need additional information to complete a mortgage application or in like a financial aid office, just verification of wages earned, things of that nature. So you're going to go out to that party, request the documents, and then re-upload them into OnBase. Again, really cool to be able to incorporate OnBase Workflow and ShareBase together. And then our final topic that we're going to hit on is workflow approval management, or called WAM for short. So WAM can help you simplify and streamline processes that require documents to be approved by multiple users before they continue through a life cycle. If an approval process is short and simple, obviously the workflow logic is going to be easy to configure. Something like sending all invoices over $1,000 to the department manager for review. Super simple. But we're talking about an approval process that's more complex. Again, as a result, that workflow logic is going to be more difficult not only to configure, but also to support and maintain. So what WAM does, instead of having numerous queues with dozens of rules and actions, that entire approval process gets consolidated down into one approval queue. Within that includes everything from evaluating the documents to assigning approvers and to keeping track of who approved what. All of this happens inside this one queue. And again, really condensing and simplifying our workflow logic, making it much easier to maintain and support. And this additional functionality is really designed for three types of users. We have our OnBase Workflow administrator who defines kind of the skeleton around the process, the permissions, notifications, and again, that overall approval process. Then we have our business expert. They own the process. They're configuring rules-based approval paths or levels, and then the actual approvers themselves. And lastly, we have our approval user. They have the same workflow functionality. They'll be in their preferred view of OnBase, and they have the ability to approve and reject. Nothing's different for them. Because, when we think about doing this in workflow only, we're going to be requesting our sysadmin to make changes, test those changes, and deploy these things into production, which takes a lot of time and resources. So by adding WAM to your workflow functionality, really allows your business users to be the ones to configure the rules and to evaluate documents. And any changes they make happen immediately. So we're going to take a look at what that looks like in the Unity client. So again, we're playing the part of a business expert here. And one of the approval paths that they have configured is for a priority vendor. And we've created conditions here on the right that we want to be true. So for any invoices that we received, AP vendor invoice document type, any of them that starts with vendor name office, we want them to go through this approval path. So again, the description here, priority approval processing for all office supply warehouse invoices are going through this approval path. And then we're going to a group of AP approvers for anyone to be able to approve. Again, that approval is essentially the same as any of our other ones down here. If we're looking at an invoice of greater than 1,000, greater than or equal to 1,000, or an invoice greater than or equal to 5,000. It's roughly the same process for either of those. But again, we have different approvers, might be managers of accounting, heads of accounting, finance directors. That's going to be the difference when we're looking at that. And how would this look without this single approval queue in our life cycle? So again, we've gone to this single approval queue. We've gotten rid of these 6 other ones. If we're talking about a PO-based invoice, we have our generalist review. That goes to managerial review, then upper management, and then possibly on to VP review. So we've, again, consolidated all of that down into this single approval queue, so we can really kind of accelerate our ability to in this approval process. A couple examples of business processes might be contracts management. We have a lot of different departments looking to produce contracts, send those out to vendors that we work with. So we've been talking about the AP example. use cases in HR onboarding, insurance claims, and even literature changes in marketing. So again, we'll just walk through one more example with kind of a visual, talking about our three types of users. Again, here on the left, our AP invoice approval process, again, is created by our workflow administrator. And this is all permissions, the notifications, and the overall process. As we move into the blue, the people who are doing the process each and every day, our business experts, are the ones that are adjusting our workflow processes on the fly. We have a PO invoice that comes in, and in this case, we're looking at supplier A. So PO invoice for supplier A comes in. We're determining that maybe 2 people need to review it. Well, say we've been reviewing supplier A's invoices because we've had issues with them over the last few months, and then that gets resolved. And now we have an issue with supplier C. So we can very easily go back to that, think of that Unity client screen and adjust that. So now we have supplier C's invoices come in for this special review. So it's, again, the idea of a dynamic changing environment that happens. People are out sick, people are on vacation, but we need things to still get done around here. So we're going to update our approvers that are available to us in these different paths and levels that they take. I'll finish up here with just another example of policies and procedures review. The basic idea of doing this, going to our different departments, and then again the individuals who are responsible for maybe different sections that we have in our policies and procedure documents. With that, I will wrap up and just say thank you, everyone, for hopping on this session. I hope I was able to at least share some new ways that you can use workflow at your organization, hopefully spark some ideas with you as well. If you'd like, please feel free to reach out to me directly or your account manager, and we'd be happy to answer any questions or be able to show some of the concepts that we showed today in more detail. Thanks again, and we'll see you at another session here soon. Take care.